By reason of insanity, Louis Theroux went to Ohio. He went west as well. He went to an Ohio facility where people were held, I suppose against their will. They were held not in prison because they couldn't go to prison. They were held in a mental facility for the crimes they committed. Some, really brutal crimes. We've been big fans on this podcast of Louis for a long time, but now he's sort of in the last 5-6 years he's gone into more serious territory. He used to be sort of covering these things where he'd every now and again almost give a wink to the camera about how bizarre the topic was.
I remember
he
did the most recent one of that he did was the sort of the porn one where he went back and revisited the porn stars he'd met before in several years previously.
Yeah. That was made for uncomfortable viewing. So I still will watch. I mean, Louis would do anything. He's got such a relaxed way of filming, and he seems to be able to put his subjects at ease regardless of the topic they're going to discuss with him. Enjoy it. It's a bit odd, but did you find it fascinating or interesting?
I don't know. I mean, I was watching this while I was doing the dishes at the same time, and I found myself sort of almost tuning out of it a little bit. Not to use the word dry, but it was literally just, an hour of interviews, wasn't it? There wasn't a lot else. What I like about Louis Theroux documentaries as opposed to other documentaries is that it's very low on incidental music and things like that.
Yes.
I mean, this didn't dabble in sensationalism. I was thinking back to the Broadmoor documentary on ITV, where it was very much focusing on like fights and stuff, and obviously there was that horrible thing where
watch that. It was just an hour of blurry people.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't
Everyone's
watch it.
face was blurred out and stuff like that. This is superior to that, but I just felt usually with Louis Theroux documentaries, I'm in there. I'm invested in, and occasionally there were characters that I was quite invested in. I liked the evangelist guy who sort of got enough to go out of the asylum. I like the shock of learning that the guy he met earlier selling the things it turned out to be this guy who murdered 2 people when he'd been let out on day release, and I thought that was quite shocking. But generally, I don't know, I just found I never really got into it in a way that I tend to with Louis Theroux documentaries.
There were moments in there that will stick with me. There was a moment when Louis speaks to the mother of the televangelist, and she says, "Well, do you want me to admit I gave birth to a nut?" Which I thought was quite candid and difficult to watch.
And because they were talking about him being on crystal meth when he was about 13, and that's what
when he was 12, or LSD when he was on.
Yeah.
My life is rich. I'm doing well. I'm in my right mind. I'm aware of that.
Before you went to Summit for the car chase, had you been hospitalized before that?
Many times.
Many times?
Since the age of 17 years old, 18 years old, I've been hospitalized several times. I've had 6 mental relapses.
What happened when you were 17?
I'll never forget it.
How do you remember it, Beverly?
I remember the school calling. This is hard. I don't want to share tears. Tears are a sign of weakness. The school called and they said, your son is acting different. And I said, how different? And they said, he thinks his dad is on the lawnmower mowing grass. He was paranoid, so I took him to a hospital to have him check him out, and they said he was very ill. And then it kind of went from there. I remember he said to me, he said, Mom, you've never wanted to admit.
Admit what?
That he's mentally ill or schizophrenic. And I said, you know what? And I never will. I said, do you want me to admit that I gave birth to a nut? He looked and he thought about it. He never said another word.
There was a moment as well when the guy was just talking very candidly about murdering his dad. Just very as if he was talking about taking the dog for a walk. He was talking about, I killed my father.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I don't know, I felt, because I think the subjects were, to an extent, emotionally distant, I found them quite distant.
And, I mean, this sounds awful. You don't need comedic relief
in
something like this, but there was no sort of let up of the sort of the tone and
Yeah, and I mean, I find Theroux, he's not like very animated in the way that other documentarians are. I mean, that's
No.
sort of his charm when he's dealing with the eccentric side of life. Obviously, he did that documentary where he like spent time with like Paul Daniels and obviously Jimmy Savile as well.
Yeah.
And then did the stuff like the porn one. He did a wrestling one, if I remember, as well.
I saw that. I've seen them all. I think.
Yeah. And this was mid to late 90s when he sort of started to.
But that was when he, like I mentioned, that was when he sort of would give a sort of a wink to the camera, as if to say, are these people for real?
But
and
I
because
think
he's older now, I feel like he probably feels he can't do that so easily now.
Well, he can't obviously do that as well with the subject matter, certainly in this one. I think when you've got someone who is quite serious like Louis Theroux is, that he works better when he's dealing with a more sort of flashy, colourful world where he doesn't sort of fit, if you know what I mean. Whereas the people are quite distant and he's quite distant as well, which doesn't to me make for it's interesting. The subject matter is interesting, but not necessarily. I'm not necessarily drawn into it in the way that I am with other with his other documentaries.